Welcome back. Tonight's story is about a girl whose own father handed her over to his business partner at 15 to cover a gambling debt, who spent 28 years building a quiet life in the law, and who one Tuesday morning saw his name move up her own docket calendar with a folder no one knew existed sitting in her bottom drawer. Pour the coffee. Stay close. My father sold me at 15 to pay off a poker debt. 28 years later, I was the federal prosecutor on his indictment. My name is Eleanor Margaret Hollis. I am 43 years old. I live in a quiet brick row house in Richmond, Virginia, with a black rescue cat named Judge and a husband who still leaves the porch light on when I work late. I am an assistant United States attorney. Most mornings I drink my coffee out of the same chipped white mug and read the docket calendar before anyone else gets in. On a Tuesday in March at 7:12 in the morning, I scrolled past a wire fraud case that had just been reassigned to my unit. I saw the lead defendant's name and the air went out of the room. Raymond Carl Hollis. My father. The man I had not spoken to in 28 years. The cinnamon smell from the bakery downstairs suddenly turned sour. My hands were cold. I did not call my co-counsel. I did not call my supervisor. I did not recuse. I just opened the bottom drawer of my desk and touched the corner of the folder that had been waiting there since 1998. If your gut already tells you what is in that folder, tell me in the comments. I want to see how many of us saw it from a mile away. We lived in a yellow split level off Route 9, outside a small town in eastern Pennsylvania. From the street, it looked like the kind of house people drive past and assume is fine. Lawn cut on Saturdays, American flag on the porch, a station wagon and a pickup in the driveway. My father was the man who shook everyone's hand at the hardware store and told the cashier a joke about the weather. My mother kept a bowl of plastic apples on the kitchen table and a smaller bowl of real ones in the fridge for company. The whole place ran on appearances. I was the oldest. My brother Daniel was 9 years younger and slept with a stuffed brown bear named Buster. The cereal in our pantry tasted like cardboard with a sugar coating. The garage smelled like motor oil and cheap beer, and the cigarettes my father pretended he had quit. My mother had one phrase she used for everything that went wrong inside that house. She would press her lips together, look out the kitchen window, and say, "That is just how men are." The dishwasher would be broken. That is just how men are. The grocery money would be gone 3 days early. That is just how men are. She said it the way other women say grace. My father had a friend named Victor Lang. He was a heavy man with a soft voice and a gold pinky ring, and a way of looking at women that always seemed to last 1 second too long. He ran a small parts distribution company 2 towns over, and my father had bought into it as a junior partner. They played cards in the basement on Thursday nights with 3 other men I did not know. My mother would send me down with a tray of sandwiches at 9 and tell me to smile politely and come right back up. Victor would always say the same thing as I set the tray down. "There she is, the pretty one." Then he would laugh and look at my father, and my father would laugh too. I was 11 the first time. I was 12. I was 13. I learned to set the tray down without lifting my eyes. There were 2 memories I kept in a small locked room at the back of my mind. The first was the summer I was 10, when my father took my brand new bicycle out of the garage and gave it to the neighbor boy because, he said, I needed to learn that nothing in this life belongs to you. That was the word he used, belongs. The second was the winter I was 13, when I came home with a report card full of A's, and he tore it in half at the kitchen table and told me that smart girls who do not know their place end up alone. My mother kept slicing the roast. The clock above the sink ticked. She did not look up. By the time I was 15, I had already started planning a quiet way out. I did not know yet that someone was planning a quieter way to keep me in. It started in April. My father went very still for about a week. He stopped joking with the cashier. He stopped watching the news at night. He sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall behind my mother's head while his coffee went cold. Then one Sunday, he came home from a card game at Victor's house, and he was almost cheerful. He kissed the top of my head, which he had not done since I was 8. He told my mother that Victor had offered me a summer job at the parts company, filing, answering phones. Real-world experience, he said. He used those exact words. Real world. He said Victor had even offered me a small room above the office so I would not have to drive back and forth. He said it would build my character. My mother smiled with her mouth closed and said, "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity." I remember the smell of the pot roast that night. I remember the sound of my brother humming to his stuffed bear in the next room. I remember thinking, why is my father being kind to me? I wanted very badly to believe it. That is the part that still embarrasses me. I wanted to believe my father. 2 weeks later, he drove me to Victor's house on a Friday night in June. I had a duffel bag with 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, a sketchbook, and $9 in the front pocket. The car smelled like the pine air freshener my father bought in bulk at the gas station. He did not turn on the radio. About a mile from Victor's driveway, he reached over without looking at me and squeezed my knee once and said, "You be smart about this, Eleanor." I thought he meant about the job. Victor's house was a long ranch at the end of a gravel road, set back behind a row of pines so you could not see it from the county road. The porch light was yellow and full of moths. Victor was waiting in the doorway in a short-sleeved dress shirt and that gold pinky ring. There were 2 other men standing behind him in the hallway that I had never seen before. The house smelled like fried onions and cigarette smoke and something sweet and chemical, like cheap aftershave. My father walked me up the steps. He did not carry my bag. At the door, he handed Victor an envelope. Victor handed him a different envelope back. They did not look at each other. They looked at the floor. Then my father turned to me and said, "You do whatever Victor tells you. You hear me." Then he walked back to the car and he drove away. He did not look back. The taillights disappeared around the bend in the gravel and the sound of the engine faded, and the crickets came back in, and I was standing on a stranger's porch with $9 in my pocket and no phone and no address that anyone in the world cared about. Victor closed the door behind me and slid the chain across. He told me to put my bag in the hallway. He told me there was a room at the end of the hall. He told me the other men were friends of his. He told me my father had explained the arrangement. I said I did not know what arrangement. He smiled at me with his soft voice and his too long look, and he said, "Your daddy owes me a lot of money, sweetheart, and you are how he is paying it." The hallway clock ticked. One of the men in the back laughed. The chemical aftershave smell got stronger. My knees locked. I could not feel my hands. I remember thinking very clearly, the way you think when your brain is trying to save your life. This is what he meant by belongs. I stayed in that hallway for what felt like an hour, but was probably a minute. I told Victor I needed to use the bathroom. He pointed down the hall and told the men to wait. I walked into the bathroom and locked the door and opened the small frosted window above the toilet, and I climbed out into the side yard in my socks. I left the duffel bag. I left the sketchbook. I took the $9. I ran through the pines in the dark until the gravel cut through my socks and my feet bled, and I came out on the shoulder of the county road. A semi went past me so close the wind almost knocked me down. I kept walking. I did not cry. I did not think. I just walked. I learned that night that your body will keep moving long after your mind has gone quiet. A woman in a small red hatchback pulled over about 2 miles down the road. Her name was Mrs. Avery. She was a school nurse driving home from a late shift at a county clinic. She rolled down the window and looked at my socks and my face, and she did not ask the big question. She asked the small one. She said, "Honey, when did you last eat?" That was the question that broke me open. I started crying so hard I could not breathe. She put me in the passenger seat and drove me straight to the county sheriff's office, and she sat next to me on a plastic chair for 6 hours while I told a female deputy named Karen Lopez everything in a small, flat voice. They went to Victor's house that night. Victor and the other 2 men were charged. My father was charged as well, for what they called child endangerment and conspiracy. In the interview room, with the tape running, my father did not deny any of it. He said he had been teaching me about the real world. He said I was too soft and needed to learn how things actually worked. He said Victor was a businessman and a deal was a deal. He used the word lesson 4 times. My mother told the social worker I had always been dramatic and that I had probably misunderstood. She used the word resilience. She said girls today expect everything to be handed to them. Neither of them ever said the word sorry. Not in the interview, not in court. Not in any of the letters my brother told me they wrote about me to relatives for years afterward. If you have ever had a parent turn cruelty into a lesson and then look hurt when you would not call it love, drop a 1 in the comments. I want to know I am not alone in this. Mrs. Avery and her husband Tom became my foster parents 3 weeks later. They lived in a small white farmhouse outside a different town entirely, with a screened porch and a brown dog named Rosie and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee and toast. Tom knocked on my bedroom door every single time before he opened it, even when the door was already open. Mrs. Avery washed my sheets every Sunday and folded them warm and left them on the foot of my bed without saying a word about it. They never asked me to talk about that night. They never told me I was lucky. They just made room. On the second Sunday I lived there, Mrs. Avery put a brand new sketchbook on the desk in my room with a pack of pencils and a note that said, "For whenever you are ready." I sat on the edge of the bed and I held that sketchbook against my chest for a long time. Nobody had ever given me something and not asked for anything back. I changed my name when I turned 18. Margaret was my grandmother's name. Hollis I kept because by then I had decided that the name was mine now, not his. I went to a small state college on a scholarship, and I worked 2 jobs and I slept 4 hours a night and I graduated in 3 years. I went to law school in Virginia because I wanted a state that did not share a border with the one I had grown up in. I met my husband, David, in the law library on a Wednesday night when he asked if he could share my table because every other one was full. He has kind brown eyes, and he listens to opera while he cooks, and he has never once raised his voice at me. We adopted Judge from a shelter the first year we were married. He sleeps on my feet when I read briefs in bed. I went into federal prosecution because the work felt clean. White collar mostly. Wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering. The kind of cases that are won with documents and patience, not with shouting. And in the bottom drawer of every desk I have ever owned, since the year I turned 18, I have kept a manila folder. Inside it are certified copies of the original police report from 1998, the sheriff's interview transcripts, my father's recorded statement, Victor Lang's plea agreement, and a single photocopied page from a notebook the deputies found in Victor's basement that night, a page in my father's handwriting with my name on it, and a dollar amount next to it. I never told David about the folder. I never told my therapist. I told myself I was keeping it in case it was ever needed. I think the truth is I was keeping it because some part of me knew this Tuesday morning was coming. The letter came in February, a month before the case landed on my docket. My brother Daniel, now 34, a high school history teacher in Ohio, wrote me a careful 3-page letter on yellow legal paper. He told me our mother had died of a stroke the year before. He told me our father had lost the parts company, lost the house, and was living in a rented room above a bar. He told me there were rumors of federal investigators talking to old associates of Victor's who had died in prison in 2009. He told me Daniel was sorry for everything, for being too young to know, and for being too scared as an adult to call. At the bottom he wrote, "I do not know if you want to know any of this. I just thought you should." I read the letter once. I put it in the bottom drawer next to the folder. I did not write back. 4 weeks later, my father's name moved up my docket calendar at 7:12 on a Tuesday morning. I did not recuse. I told myself it was because the conflict was old, the relationship was severed, the legal standard was technically met. The truth was simpler. I wanted to be the one in the room. I prepared the case the way I prepare every case, quietly, thoroughly. I did not mention to my co-counsel, a good young lawyer named Marcus Reed, that the lead defendant shared my last name. Hollis is common enough. He never asked. The trial took 11 days. My father was 68 years old and thinner than I remembered, and his hands shook when he poured water from the pitcher at the defense table. He did not recognize me at first. I had been 15. I was 43. I had a different first name on the nameplate, and a wedding ring and silver in my hair. On the third day, during a sidebar, his eyes finally caught on my face and stayed there. I watched him understand. I did not blink. I went back to my notes. The jury came back guilty on all 12 counts on a Friday afternoon. The courtroom emptied out. Marcus shook my hand and told me I had been ice cold in closing, and he meant it as the highest compliment a young prosecutor can give. I told him I had a quick word for the defendant before the marshals took him back. He nodded and stepped into the hallway. I walked over to the defense table. My father was sitting with his hands folded. His lawyer had stepped away. I set the manila folder on the table in front of him. I opened it to the photocopied page in his own handwriting. My name, the dollar amount. I did not raise my voice. I said, "Do you remember what you told me in the car that night?" He did not answer. I said, "You told me to be smart about this." I said I was. I said, "You told me that nothing in this life belongs to you." I said, "You were right about one thing. I do not belong to you. I never did." He opened his mouth. I closed the folder. I picked it up. I walked out of the courtroom, and I did not look back. The taillights of my own car pulling out of the courthouse garage 20 minutes later were the last thing he ever saw of me. If you have stayed with me until now, thank you. Tell me in the comments what part of the story stayed with you the most. I drove home that night on the interstate with the radio off. The porch light was on when I pulled into the driveway, the way it always is. Judge was in the front window. David was in the kitchen making soup. I sat in the car for a few minutes with my hands on the wheel, and I talked very quietly to the 15-year-old girl who had walked out of a bathroom window in her socks. I told her that the men in that hallway did not get to decide what she was worth. I told her that being unwanted by broken people is not the same as being unworthy of love. I told her she did not have to carry the folder anymore. I told her we were home. Then I went inside and I ate soup with my husband, and I slept 8 hours for the first time in 28 years.